Nick, I'm going to ask you a true or false question here, and you can answer however you see fit. Does Young Frankenstein use the original Frankenstein props for its movie? True or false?
This could be double because you don't. Usually the staple is yes, but you don't know. Sometimes it could be like a false no. So I'm gonna go with no.
It actually does.
All right.
I was right. Okay. Story to start this.
I thought you were gonna do.
No, I was not. Came from Bride. No. But real quick story. They actually, while they were searching to build the props, they discovered that the family of the original prop maker, actually the original prop maker for the movie, kept all those.
Kenneth Strickland, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So he's actually credited at the beginning of the film as a special thanks because he actually still held all the equipment from the original Frankenstein.
I think he had it in.
It's all the stuff. Yeah, it's just sitting in storage. And I just think that's an amazing thing because we're going to talk about Young Frankenstein today, and it's such a movie that cares about where it came from. And this is where we talk about that quote that I consistently use about Mel Brooks. In order to parody something, you have to love it.
Yes.
And it's really prevalent here in Young Frankenstein, which is the film we're talking about today as we continue our Mel Brooks expose.
I'm Nick for the St. Paul Filmcast.
I'm Kyle from GoetheFilmReviews.com. Let's get started.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast.
I'm Kyle from GoetheFilmReviews.com.
And we'd like to thank all the new subscribers and the loyal listeners and the people that continue to watch. We appreciate it. Yes, continue so. Tell your friends and the options for the Patreon down below. So if you want to participate, check out the Patreon. Young Frankenstein.
Which is the story of Frederick, the grandson of notable scientist Dr. Frankenstein, has tried his whole life to distance himself from his family's legacy. When he's invited to the castle in Transylvania, Frederick discovers that his grandfather may in fact have been onto something with his research. He teams up with the hunchbacked Igor and the attractive assistant Inga, and using the very same equipment his grandfather used, Frederick sets out to conquer the secrets of life and death, but the local villagers will have none of it. Having horrible memories of 5 times before, they enlist Inspector Kemp to learn Frederick's intentions in the hope that Frankenstein is not continuing the family business.
Okay, so supposedly the idea of this film came on the set of Blazing Saddles of Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks sitting talking about old movies and all the appreciations. And Mel Brooks has pitched the idea, well, why don't we make a parody of all the classic, old-fashioned horror movies that we did? So the little kernel of that blazing, it's sitting down, during break time of Blazing Saddles that this actually developed.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think we talk a lot about, director-actor pairings, and I don't think a lot of people mention the Gene Wilder, Mel Brooks pairings of films that they did. They didn't do a ton of movies together, but they did have like a rapport where they consistently were working. What's funny here is that this was like Wilder's baby more than Brooks's.
Yeah.
Because he was the one who really wanted to push for this, this decision within, Frederick's mind of I can't be like my grandfather. He was insane, but then feeling this familial pull to join up with there, and that's why I think this film has the most care and love given to it than any other Mel Brooks film.
So Young Frankenstein comes after Blazing Saddles. Actually, they came out the same year.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of accolades came to Blazing Saddles, not so much for Young Frankenstein, but it seems that everybody kind of warmed up to Young Frankenstein and pulled away kind of from Blazing Saddles, maybe because the politics and the satire, the jokes don't really follow well. Madeline Kahn did get accolades for her performance in Blazing Saddles, and she does in this movie as well. But we also have the same editor. John Howard did win an award for editing Blazing Saddles, but I think here he's got a much more difficult task, but because he had to edit about 3 hours of footage into a wonderfully crafted time-beat comedy.
Yeah, I watched the bloopers from Young Frankenstein, which is basically just 7 minutes of Gene Wilder giggling. But it's interesting how many of the bloopers are actual scenes that aren't in the movie. I had to stop myself and figure out what scene are they actually doing. They're not really. It's something that was removed later on. This film was massive in length when it got done because Brooks kind of did that where he embraced the ability to have some fun with the source material, and he's always kind of shoot it the way I wrote it, and then let's have some fun figuring it out. When you have a cast as rich as this one with so many different styles, it works really well to the overall feeling of the film.
So they have a lot of bloopers, they have a lot of extra footage because, as Mel Brooks said, for every one joke that worked, 3 didn't. Mm-hmm. But necessarily, they wrapped up filming a week early, so they actually played around for the next 7 days of just, let's try this, let's try this. So, Mel's not really somebody who's a stickler. He likes improvisations. In fact, Marty Feldman did a lot of improvisations. He did about 20 takes of him biting Madeline Kahn.
Oh yeah, those are all in the bloopers. Yeah.
So why they had to get a new one because he did tear it up to pieces.
He did tear a chunk off. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to mention also because every time I watched Young Frankenstein so many times, but I forget. Gene Hackman's in this movie. I have to make sure I put this out. He's in the movie.
Yep. And
we always
the
forget
distinction actually too. He says one of his favorite moments acting his entire career is being able to make the entire cast and crew of Young Frankenstein break out laughing. When he ends his scene and he was like, I was going to make espresso. That was a complete ad-lib. And it's probably one of the best jokes in the movie. So he does have that distinction. He said it's one of the great moments of his career is that he was able to captivate the entire cast and crew and catch them off guard, which would be very difficult to do in a uncredited cameo for the film. But I want to talk about Gene Wilder as Frederick because, again, like Mel Brooks directing this film, Gene Wilder told him, I don't want you to be in it. He said, because you have a tendency to kind of play up and overact and lampoon to an excessive degree. He said, works in some films, and in many films it does. But he said, I want this to be a more subtle, nuanced character piece. And that's what he did with Frederick, is he plays it only to excess when he's having a fun with the source material. Yeah. You know, whenever he's doing the It's Alive, it could work. You know, all those moments when he's kind of like playing to excess, it's only because the character he's lampooning and homaging is also doing the same thing in the original films. Yeah,
Gene Wilder is almost not regarded as a comedian, almost like a straight man most of the time. But it's the build-up of the comedy, right? We're building up to the point he's just going to erupt. That's kind of Gene's little thing. He's not going to do the... You know, he does physical comedy, the gags of the neckties and everything, but it's not the, like Rodney Dangerfield of the one jokes, everything. It's a more subtle, intellectual kind of a philosophy kind of
It's true. He's really the straight actor in that scene, that famous scene with Cloris Leachman. She says it's her favorite scene in the entire film, which was the, would you like some brandy? No, thank you, good night.
The enabling...
milk? No. Ovaltine? That scene itself showcases how straight mannish he is. Yeah. Because he's basically answering her like a man who's fed up and wants to go to sleep. And it's not even like he's acknowledging the Ovaltine of it all. You know, he's not even really aware of the fact that this part is kind of removed from real life.
I also thought John Morris did the score for this, and here he's not really doing a comedic score, he's doing an homage to the old films. This is why it's ineffective. You got the eerie music, the lightning, and the theatrics. So even if you subtract the musical score and listen to it, it seems like the old-fashioned horror movies, and this is why it's an effective film.
I'm glad you pointed that out, actually, because I am a huge fan of the Universal monster films. I've got the 30-pack of all the originals from the 30s to the 50s. And I regularly go through them, at least during the Halloween holiday season, but then just throughout life. I've been just finishing them up now, watching all of them from Halloween. But take some time, and the Universal Blu-rays aren't great. But when it breaks it down like that, is that score, if you hadn't had time to really compare them, you would almost think that they just lifted it from the original film. Yeah. When you compare the two, they don't sound anything alike, but it has that perfect level of, again, homage without lampooning. It's a very straightforward and serious take on a score. Right. It's not, bombastic and trying to, like John Williams and get larger than life. It's very subtle, and you could just think maybe they stole it from something. And I think that's what's so effective about this movie is that they borrowed the props. They borrowed a score that was similar to the time. They had the production design. Everything from this film, they tried to do as if it was done in the 30s, and it's very successful because it feels like this could almost be an in-canon sequel to the original Frankenstein in the same way that, like, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein was, where it was like they're taking the material seriously and having fun with it at the same time.
Yeah, and also it's a comedy film, but you also experience, like irritation. It's a little bit of a melodrama. It's sad at sometimes. You feel bad for the monster, much like you do in Frankenstein. So you got a lot of especially when he escapes and he goes through the whole villages and everything. Even though they play up on the fun, the comedy of him with the kid and everything. Costuming, there's another homage because it's Dorothy Jenkins, and Dorothy Jenkins did costuming for like Sound of Music, the Ten Commandments, Music Man. So she knows to do large ensemble costuming, and it fits because even the townsmen have their own costuming, and it's elaborate costuming that doesn't really push out, right? It doesn't really pop, but it fits into the world.
Yeah, and if you watch the old Frankenstein films in the Universal world, there are scenes of the townspeople collecting and having like a discussion about what are we going to do about Frankenstein. And again, this scene just feels like that scene feels so lifted out of like this world. It feels like it could have existed in that time, and that's great because the costuming doesn't take away from it. And they even go as far as to make that mention of there, and I mentioned it in our synopsis recap 5 times before. They're literally like referencing the 5 Frankenstein films that were there. This is a literal sequel, and in much the same way, it's actually not a remake of Frankenstein.
More like Bride of Frankenstein.
Well, really, Son of Frankenstein, the third film, gets it like way in depth with it, including the one-armed inspector that is lampooned with Kemp in this film. There is actually a one-armed man who does the inspections in Son of Frankenstein as well, to a point of like mirror imaging almost the entire film. I think they even have the same runtime.
I like that you bring up the one-armed man in the costuming because Kenneth Mars won the audition by simply coming to the audition with an eye patch with a monocle over the eye patch. Yeah. And Mel Brooks is like, "Stop, Kenneth, you win." And then he started mumbling the lines where Mel Brooks was like, "I don't understand what you're saying." He goes, "That's the whole point. You watch these old movies, you don't understand what they're saying."
Yeah. And then, the character he's lampooning, though, has kind of a lot of that same feeling to it. Yeah. Where, again, like, he's not going above and beyond to make it a silly thing. He's just pointing out the silliness of the character because it's played seriously in Son of Frankenstein and it's completely lampooned here, but he's not forcing it. Including that monocle over the eye patch. I didn't notice it until maybe a year ago. And I've watched this film countless times in my life.
That's why it's so
and it just it kind of sticks with you. And that's one of those jokes. Not everything is hidden in the background. Or unreferenced, if you will, in this movie. A lot of it's right in your face comedy. But that's one of those moments, kind of like when we talked about like Airplane a few weeks back, where it's like, you don't have to notice it all this time, but when you do, it works. Like, I didn't notice one of my favorite gags, which is the Frau Blucher line when the horse whinnies. Yeah. I didn't notice it the first time I saw it. It took me a few watches, actually, where I realized like that it was happening every time they mentioned her name, and then also that they eventually realized it too, and that I kind of like, it took me out of the film in the best possible way.
We better make damn sure before we start killing people that before we start going around killing people, we better make damn right. That's one of the best lines ever. Before we start pillaging and really murdering people, we better make damn sure he's back to what his grandfather used to do. And that's the funny of it, because it's still stuck in the genre world, even though it's supposed to be 2 generations after. They're still kind of stuck in this time warp of, even though it's 80 years ago, it's still in that little village warm, it's still outside the bubble of time. I'll also talk about Danny Goldman. Now, Danny Goldman is the antagonist student.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Who harasses Gene Wilder. He's also the voice of Brainy Smurf in the Smurfs. So
I'm thinking for a second. You keep talking.
So the guy who antagonizes him, Dr. Frankenstein, and that's Danny Goldman. And if you go back and listen to Smurfs and listen to Brainy Smurf, you can kind of tell. And then he went to a lot of Comic-Cons as pitched as, I was in Young Frankenstein and I was a Smurf.
So either comes black and white or he comes blue.
Yeah. Also want to mention Walk This Way.
Yeah.
Now, that was a very famous song also by Aerosmith, who got inspiration from this movie. But also is a old gag joke from, I believe it's the movie The Thin Man, or after the after The Thin Man, where the gag was Walk This Way and everybody mimics the walk. And I think Mel Brooks liked that old-fashioned movie. It's part of the canon of old jokes still coming into the new world. So... Also, but it's a hit song as well.
That's fair. Yeah, it's something where it's almost like an urban legend that Aerosmith took this song, because I've read it multiple times and it's kind of like I don't believe it, but then I keep hearing it and I'm like, maybe that actually is how it happened. But that's how the comedy works in this film. It's almost like, again, like taking the props and the costumes from the 30s. They took the level of comedy from the 30s too, where it's a subtle comedy that kind of requires your attention to make it work. But things like the Walk This Way or the werewolf, their wolf, their castle, it's very simplistic comedy that just kind of takes a moment, takes a beat to make you laugh. And I just, having watched those Universal films, going through them again, I'd never seen Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein until this kind of watch.
There's some actually really horrific things in that movie.
Yeah.
But they get away with it because it's comedy.
But the comedy level of Young Frankenstein is at the exact same level, where it's like, it's so obvious and it's so silly, and a part of it kind of makes you want to roll your eyes because of how just like dumb the comedy is. And that's kind of the genius of Mel Brooks, is that he can make something that's funny and also groan worthy, that you laugh more because you're groaning at it.
Yeah, it looks like Abbott Costello. You really want to like time out, guys. Let me explain this to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before you get even deeper, which is like almost in a Mel Brooks movie, you want like time out, guys. Okay, this is what's happening, and then they're like, oh right, yeah. Hans Delbruck, it was a real person.
Yeah, and I didn't realize Hans Delbruck was a real person until this viewing.
And he wasn't really like a brilliant scientist or saint. He was just, I think he was like a military historian. His son actually won a Nobel Prize for science. So even though it's a reference like Hans Delbruck, it was a real person that they referenced in the movie.
Yeah. It's kind of those references where you don't really know why they chose it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take away, and having the cleverness to base their entire story purely on this, because this is kind of a unique spoof in that it's not lampooning all horror films as much as, like, say, Blazing Saddles did all westerns, or like Spaceballs does all science fiction movies. This really owns into the Frankenstein mythos, and being able to kind of have fun with the abnormal brain, where he thinks the name is Abby Normal, like just those kinds of things. I continue going back to it, but this is in every way, shape, and form a love letter to its subject, where there's their time taken care, and again, like these two performers in Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder, they love Frankenstein. They love this kind of environment, or else they couldn't have pulled off something that's so beautifully homaged. And so I respect the film in addition to laughing at it.
So you got an introduction of Terry Garr, and here she used to, I think what the story is, she was part of the hair, do the hair for Cher. She's part of that club, and she based this entire performance on Cher's former hairdresser, who came from Germany with his eccentric, outrageous accent. So I don't know if Terry got her worked on a crew, or she just was familiar with Cher's hairdresser team that she based her performance on. That person from Cher's hairdresser, Madeline Kahn, who comes with this uptight virginity that's hilarious.
But it's a great flip from her character in Blazing Saddles. Like,
yes, it's the opposite.
The films work so well. I think there was actual discussion about, like, do we get Kahn to play Inga, or do we get her to play, the fiance? And I think that was kind of the fun thing, was like they completely flip what they were doing with it as well. And she's less of a sex pot, and she's more of like the great ad-lib moments of no tongue and taffeta, and trying to avoid it too. I love that.
Maintain her immaculate, right?
Yeah. The funny thing about Terry Garr is, like, I love that they play her, as the attractive assistant. It's very on display that she's the attractive assistant.
What is it?
But I like that everything that comes out of her character in her interactions is always accidentally perceived sexually. Like the knockers thing where he's talking about that. Yeah. It's always like, her attractiveness is on display, but it's only accidentally referenced.
Yeah.
Like when she's kissing his fingers, I wish there was something I could do, and then he realizes he's touching her breast, and he's it's just kind of this accidental moment where, like, the sexuality kind of plays its part, and I like that it's not, it's kind of like on beating you over the head with it, but not beating you over the head with it.
And then you have Cloris Leachman, who tries to ugly herself up.
She does it all the time, and, like, it's funny because when you see like actual pictures of her from, like, just daily life, she was gorgeous, but she always forcibly played herself in these, kind of like downplayed, unattractive roles. It's the funniest thing about a truly beautiful actress that just seemed to play off of that so well.
Her famous pitch was when she was in the Last Picture Show, and she approached Peter Bogdanovich to be in the movie, and he was like, we asked for this character to kind of homely, and she's like, well, I'm not really ugly, I'm just Iowa pretty.
That's good. But it's true though, because I think of her in this film and High Anxiety. She also plays like really. God, like, I think she even had like a mustache. I think she kind of like let her hair grow out and like really like
she didn't like shave or anything.
Yeah, buttered it all up. and then I think about, like, she always kind of played this level of unattractiveness, but then she was also kind of
put off.
And like I always remember her in Beer Fest, when she plays the grandmother, who they all found out was like a whore.
She's in that,
and just that famous line of "I always sleep better when I got a little sausage in with me." As she's carrying the actual sausage off stage and stuff, and she just always plays off these like really unusual roles.
Kind of gross.
And you have to respect an actress who could play to her physical attractiveness and just chose to play exactly the opposite. She's a lovely actress that we lost too soon, because I just like, when you see her in film, you're like, man, I wish we got more of that, even though she was kind of in everything.
I don't remember about before this film. I try to research when was the last time we had a comedy that was in black and white. Mm-hmm. I know it was probably in the late 60s, probably even mid 60s, a comedy that was primarily filmed black and white. I'm thinking like Marty, maybe, kind of like the 60s. So when this movie came out in black and white, it's been a long time since anybody intentionally made a big budget movie, especially a comedy that was in black and white. And Mel Brooks came in a lot of friction doing so, even though he tried to maintain that, even though a lot of movie producers try to scale it or trick him not to do it or get it in color.
And there was a lot of give and take in terms of what they would allow versus what they had to kind of give in. And you got to respect that too about Mel Brooks, is that he knew how to play the game of like, well, I'll do this for you, but I want black and white. And it was something that he tried to do actually 20 years later with Dracula Dead and Loving It, but the studio was very unbudging, like it needs to be in color. And he actually wanted to do the same thing with that film, was play it in black and white. Yeah, and he just couldn't get it to work. And I really kind of hope, I wish that had been the case, because I actually have watched a black and white cut of Dracula Dead and Loving, and I think it's a superior version of the film, because it does feel old. It feels 30s.
And that's where
I think that's where the key is, isn't it? The look here,
I think that's where he wins. So the idea that I think he approached Columbia, and Columbia was kind of like, oh yeah, you can do it in black and white, but he knew they were going to do it in color. And then he went to 20th Century Fox and scored a major deal for 5 movies. So one studio's stickler, another gets the accolades, right? Because 20th Century Fox went on to contract for his other movies like Life Stinks, To Be or Not to Be, High Anxiety, and it proved to be very successful for 20th Century Fox. And keep the creativity and motor engine for Mel Brooks.
Yep, and it was nice to have kind of a deal, because there's so many times where you think his movies are kind of like Kevin Smith's, where like they have an audience and you don't expect them to always make money because he has his audience, but he has to kind of stay within those confines. And then again, he got a lesser budget because of the black and white choice, and it forced him to be more creative within the confines of that budget. But getting that deal probably saved the fact that we got Mel Brooks movies, because it allowed him to make some risks and make some mistakes. And we may not have the person today without that deal.
Another thing that was supposed to be cut, Mel Brooks didn't like the dancing and put it on the Ritz. He thought it was too ridiculous. It took it out of the environment. But Gene Hackman was a stickler for it. He wanted to be in it. They had a fiction. I think they had a huge fight that they did talk to after.
Wilder and him really argued about that. And actually the story of that fight is rather funny too, because Mel Brooks has a tendency to storm out of the room when he gets too mad, which I've always wanted to see, because you never get to see that, because it's behind closed doors. But he actually left the fight and then called Gene Wilder from another phone, and he said, "Yeah, you had some weirdo angry man that left. You shouldn't let those people into your house." And he it was kind of that.
I love his way apology.
Is that he never actually apologized and just warned you shouldn't let those crazy people in your home, which is a true testament to those two. And I mentioned this with their acting and directing power together was a beautiful thing. In that I watched this video from just a few years ago after Gene Wilder had passed away, of Mel Brooks saying that his biggest sadness came now not from just the loss of Gene, but not being able to call him anytime he wanted to. And it's a really sad video, because you see these two people that genuinely loved each other for 30, 40 years, and they had this great working relationship that churned out some amazing content.
Yeah, and also Mel was kind of like, he was right. He was going to fight for this, and if you really believe something, you're going to fight hard for it. And that was kind of his convincing, okay, if you really are that stickler on it, if you're really that stubborn about it, let's keep it in there. And it's kind of still one of the best bits of the film.
And it avoids the pitfall of some of Mel Brooks's movies, which is that sometimes their second act kind of struggles to maintain a story.
Yeah.
We've talked about it with the producers, where it feels like there should have actually been more in that story,
right?
But also it just isn't. It isn't as comedically haphazard as the other parts of the film. And we'll talk about it again with other films this month, I'm sure. But kind of struggling to keep the story. For some reason, that maintains a level of laughter, but also really works story-wise of what they're plotting to do with it. If that scene wasn't in there, we would lose a definite bit of story that guides the film in its third act.
Right. Like Producers, I said, is the best first act of Mel Brooks. It's the first act of the film Where I think even Young Frankenstein, the first act of the film, is not really the funniest, even though there's a lot of good material.
It's funnier on multiple watches because you see the setups. That's what it is with that part, is that the first act doesn't work until you know where it's going.
Yeah. And then the second act is the huge explosion, and then the third kind of gets a little silly, but it's melodramatic too. It's a little sad at times as well. Mm-hmm. So overall, it is a big win. I think it's one of those that it fits. It's one of those comedies that fits in a theater, and it fits watching at home too.
Yeah. And I always go between this and Blazing Saddles for my favorite Mel Brooks movie. Like, I don't know if, like, kind of comes down to sometimes it's like personal choice, or usually when I start watching Mel Brooks, I kind of just watch all the Mel Brooks I have. Yeah. But I always kind of fluctuate between those two films. It's like, which one is the best, absolute best Mel Brooks film? And I think if we're looking for overall, like, structured care, I think that this is the best made Mel Brooks movie, because what Blazing Saddles kind of has going for it and against it is its ability to explode into silliness. Like the third act in that film kind of forgets that it's a Western.
Forgets it's a movie, right? Yeah.
Whereas this one does maintain and hold itself through all the way to the end. There's a genuine love for the source material that I really think is great here. And that's why the Academy Award nomination is an adapted screenplay, not an original screenplay, because they literally adapted it so closely from the book and the films that there's a level of connection that's just unbeatable.
After this movie, it took a long time to make another Frankenstein, a legitimate horror Frankenstein movie, because the parody was so successful that it's hard to go back and make a serious, horrific Frankenstein movie. It took almost to the 90s to get back, because after this, you get, Mob Squad or Transylvania 65000. So the parody was so successful that it even put off the legitimate genre of Frankenstein for a while, even to the 90s.
It's probably a good thing, because, now everyone's making one. But, it's true, when I watched Young Frankenstein, just like when I watched Dracula Dead and Loving It for the first time, I actually rented both films under the guise of them being horror movies. I thought, in my childhood innocence, that these were two horror movies. In the case of Young Frankenstein, I kind of got mad when I watched it, because I was like, it's not scary. Like, I was told this was a great movie, it's not scary. And actually, with Dracula Dead and Loving It, there was moments early on in the film that actually did creep me out. So it was kind of that weird, dichotomy of it, was that I got mad at Young Frankenstein and actually didn't watch it for many years afterwards, because I just didn't get it. And came back to it later on in my life once I realized who Mel Brooks was.
So, have you seen Young Frankenstein?
Yep, we both recommend it. So what do you think about it right now? It's currently floating around there on the streaming scape, so go ahead and check it out if you haven't seen it yet. And then let us know in the comment section down below, is this your favorite Mel Brooks? Is it your least favorite Mel Brooks? Are you a fan of Frankenstein as a character and genre and storytelling?
Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah. Do you think this is kind of a worthwhile experience to watch, and would you recommend it to others? Let us know your comments down below. As Nick mentioned at the beginning of the episode, we also got the Patreon there. Check on that. Yeah. The link is down below in the description as well. You guys can also comment, subscribe. All those things help us out here at the channel. Keep us going, and we've noticed your guys' contributions. Yeah. And honestly, every morning, favorite thing to do is wake up and see what things people are commenting, what things people and new subscribers. It's something that brings a lot of joy to my life, and I'm sure it does to Nick too. Yeah. We both just love discussing those little successes of gaining a few more people to the crew. So thank you guys for joining us so much. Once again, my name is Kyle Goethe, and you can check out all my film reviews on goethereviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. We'll catch you later.